primitive societies the world over, tales of the past are often preserved in drama and song, in performance and pantomime, acted out for all to share and see. For the Eskimo, there is no such thing as a written language, so the art of the dramatist and the storyteller is much admired. Here, history is only as real as the speaking voice, and the past lives mostly in talk, in anecdote and remembered lore. Even the children love to entertain themselves in this way, and such a tale is being told now. Like most sagas, this one came from the past. People had forgotten how long ago it happened, enough that it was once upon a time. It came to be known as the legend of the brave fawns. It's a favorite among Eskimo youngsters because it's about children. Two children, as it turned out, who had to be very resourceful and very, very brave. Their names were Lolly and Joseph. Not Eskimo names at all, but easy to remember names given them at the mission school. But Joseph and Lolly were Eskimo through and through. And it was their native intelligence and self-reliance that were to be put to the test. Their adventure began quietly enough as a routine hunting expedition along the Arctic coast. Their father was Ningiuk, said to be the best hunter in the village. And if young Joseph wanted to be anything, it was a hunter. Hopefully one as famous as his father. In Joseph's eyes, men like his father, his grandfather, and his uncle were the true heroes. It was generally their hunting feats that were turned into the tribal legends, and he wanted in the worst way to be like them. Small and untried as he was, he had no way of knowing he might one day become a legend himself. A hunter of long experience, Ningiuk knew the sound for what it was, and soon his spyglass confirmed his expectations. There they were at last, the walrus, moving north on their summer migration. There was the meat for the coming winter. There were the tough hides for boats. There was the ivory to carve into harpoons, knife handles, household utensils, and even trinkets. There it all lay, Ningiuk's harvest, his treasure, and his livelihood. His for the taking. First things first, he knew the walrus were not about to vanish, and so he put in for shore. This was familiar ground for Ningiuk. Ever since his boyhood, he had been coming to this particular river. Every summer, he and his people would travel the 200 miles from their home village to set up a temporary camp on this sandbar. It was important to be here, ready and waiting when the walrus came. Summer camp was a familiar chore, and the family went about it without need of directions or even conversation. From long practice and old habit, each knew his or her task. For her part, Lolly had known from the beginning that she would be the watcher of the fire. Since her mother had died 2 winters before, it was taken for granted she would fill a mother's role as fire tender, camp cook, and caretaker, and guardian of her small brother. She definitely would not be going on the hunting expedition. But little Joseph had other ideas and secret hopes. Being Eskimo, hunting was in his blood. Come the day when he could claim his own gun and carry it with him wherever he went, that would be the high point of all his boyish hopes. He almost wished his sister had not come. Then maybe the men would take him with them. But Ningiak knew better. Walrus were not for children. Hunting them was hard, exhausting work, and sometimes terribly dangerous. And so it was settled. Joseph must stay behind. A boy's dream could not change the facts of life. Ningiuk was eager to be off. He would not wait longer, even for a meal. A cup of tea, perhaps, but no more. He promised to be back in 24 hours at the most, maybe even in 10 or 12, given good hunting. He put Lolly in charge and asked Joseph to mind his sister, and his parting words were, "Keep the fire ready. For supper, we'll all have walrus meat." And so Ningiuk and his companions pushed off. There was work to do out on the ice pack. Walrus hunting was the high point of their year. They were eager to get at it. Little Joseph could feel the hunter's excitement, the quickening of the blood, the promise of danger. And he seemed unwilling, even now, to let the boat go without him. There was no holding them back now. The hunters were off to sea, off to adventure and risk, pitting themselves against the unknown dangers of the Arctic deep. Meanwhile, he, not yet a man, must stay behind and do woman's work. It was bitter gall for a small boy with big dreams. hours, the children had a net in the river and were starting the annual harvest of Arctic salmon. Here was a task they could easily handle while the men were away. It was as vital that they take a good harvest of these valuable fish as it was that their father take a good catch of walrus. One of the reasons for the camp being here was this yearly salmon run, but it would be a brief event lasting only a few days, and so it was necessary to take the catch while the chance offered. In this land of potential starvation, all food sources counted, and none could be safely ignored or overlooked. In winter, the Arctic is its own icebox, and refrigeration comes automatically with the weather. In the time of bitter cold, a fish will freeze stiff in seconds. But in summer, a salmon that must last is best stockpiled after a session in the sun. And long ago, ever since she could hold a knife, Lolly had been taught the art of preparing the catch for drying. When it comes to household chores, a small boy's enthusiasm will last just so long. Then he's apt to go off looking for activity that's more fun. Joseph had managed to catch a lemming, that strange Arctic animal no bigger than a mouse. It was unusual to come upon a lone lemming. Generally, they traveled in swarming colonies. This little fellow, it appeared, was either lost or an orphan. Well, in Joseph, he'd found a friend who meant to keep him as a pet. Little did the boy realize that this simple act would have strange consequences. Lolly, meanwhile, put up the last of her fish, and then let her thoughts turn to other matters. Somewhere on that distant horizon, she half hoped she might catch sight of the hunters. It had been many hours since they left, but as yet there was no sign. But then Eskimo time is unlike any other time. During the tundra summer, there's no day and night. Only one long, continuing period of sunlight. And sometimes a normal day can seem unending. While the children slept, more precious hours slipped by, like the current in the nearby river. But the tundra itself never sleeps, and only rarely the animals upon it. The Arctic wolf, for one, rests only when gorged. When hungry, he hunts for whatever he can find. Strangely enough, the main predator in these parts is not the wolf. It is starvation, a ruthless specter that cuts down man and animal alike. It is ever present, and all creatures must learn to live in its shadow. The wolf knows its sharp edge as well as any, and so a windfall such as this must be devoured as quickly as possible. This ravenous kind of hunger is what is meant by the expression, wolfing it down. At this moment that Joseph's lemming chose to make a noise. A fatal and final false move.
Joseph, wake up! The men are back! Father's here! Joseph! It's Papa! Come. Who did? A wolf. A wolf! Fire gun, I'll shoot him. In your sleep? Where's my lemon? You should know where it is. The wolf got it. Come on and help me get more fish.
Suddenly, things seem to be going all wrong. First, a robber wolf, and now some even bolder thieves.
Lolly, look!
Lolly knew that seals favored a fish diet, but she hadn't expected them to destroy her nets. This was serious. Without a net, no fish. Without fish, no winter food supply. But Eskimos are not ones to cry over spilt milk or stolen fish. Stoically, Lolly went about the business of taking inventory. First, a calculating of their needs and their chances. If only she knew how long they must hold out. Their food wouldn't last for many more meals, but then Ningiok had never intended to be gone so long. She came to a decision. Until he returned, they must make the tundra itself support them. Not an easy task for two youngsters without gun or guidance to help them. Eking out a living here is touch and go at best for bird, animal, or human. In this bleak scene, there is little that is edible. Still, tribal experience had taught Lolly's people how to look for things that might escape the untrained eye. And so she and Joseph set out, prepared to fall back on ancient lore and knowledge. The wisdom of the race would be their only hope now. It was no easy matter finding something to eat in this bleak emptiness. It was a challenge, calling for a sharp eye, and sometimes a sharp ear. Ah, well, live and let live. Some things are more for pleasure than eating. What Lolly really hoped to find was a nest with eggs in it. She'd been too late with the baby snipes earlier. Eggs she might have taken, but not the young birds. She knew it was late for eggs, but she kept hoping. Ah, a hawk. With a nest somewhere? She would watch where it went. Yes, a hawk with a nest. And some ferocious-looking occupants. To say nothing of a guardian hovering very, very near. The hawk is a predatory bird. It must kill to live. It hadn't occurred to Lolly that she might have to do the same. Not yet, anyway. For all her maturity, Lolly was as much a child at heart as her small brother, and she too could enjoy the tundra for its lighter moments. Such things as the little bird that went around turning over rocks for its dinner, called a turnstone. What else? She and Joseph should have a beak so long, and a job so easy. A nesting ground. Now their harvest might really bring in something. Eggs in abundance, by the dozens, by the hundreds, theirs for the taking. Here was sustenance and supply that seemed bounty without end. In this treeless terrain where all nesting of necessity was on the ground, the gathering of eggs was a relatively simple matter. And the birds, in their confusion, were quite defenseless against marauders. Once in a while, though, a victim would decide to put up a battle, and then the game got more exciting. Much to their chagrin, the young robbers discovered their fun had backfired. Their precious cargo had been badly damaged. Maybe they weren't as smart as they thought. After all, when you put all your eggs in one basket, you can't very well roll around on the ground and not come up with a broken shell or two. In fact, you may discover you've unintentionally made yourself an omelet. In nature's scheme, there is little that goes to waste, especially in the food department. What doesn't suit one will almost certainly suit another. And so it turned out that some wolf pups enjoyed an unexpected feast. When the young wolves chose to tag along behind, the children were quick to accept their company, forgetting for the moment that wolves generally meant trouble. For their part, the pups sensed there might be another hand out here somewhere, and their growls took on a kind of mock ferociousness. But Lolly might well have obeyed her first instincts.
Run, Joseph! Run!
Then a strange thing happened. Their bodies seemed paralyzed by fear, their feet chained to the ground, their arms heavy as lead. The terror of the nightmare was upon them, and they ran as though fleeing a monster in a dream. Break this old shack. It was just barely wolf-proof, but at least it was protection of a sort. In the confusion and excitement, a development would occur that would put a whole new complexion on the situation. It started with the greediness of the pups, and with one especially. This little fellow had had a taste of fine raw eggs. He was sure there were more around here somewhere. And what with a little searching and following his nose, he was clever enough to find them. But soon his mother smelled him out. He was inside, she was outside, and this just wouldn't do. Suddenly, she knew the frustration of not being able to reach him. and this brought on a natural reaction of animal anger. Now she had to get to her offspring. No two ways about it. It was Joseph who finally sized up the situation. When in a trap, toss out the bait. A simple answer that seemed to satisfy all. And so it turned out that all the wolves had really wanted was to put their family back together. Enough of adventure for one day. It was time to be getting back to camp. Hopefully the men would be there by now. The silent camp came as a heavy disappointment to the children. There was something disquieting about the scene. Something not right. They had thought by now they would find a kettle singing on the fire, the sound of excited voices recalling the hunt, the smell of meat cooking. Instead, emptiness. An ominous emptiness that filled Lolly's heart with foreboding. Where were the men? What could have happened? Everything depended on their safe return. How long since they had left? 12 hours, 24? Lolly had no way of knowing exactly. She carried no watch. Only a sense of time in her head and in her heart. Now a kind of fear began to gnaw on her nerves. What if the men didn't come back at all? It was a question she knew she shouldn't ask, especially in front of Joseph. For his sake, in fact, she must keep up a good front and seem optimistic and pin her hopes on, well, on hope itself. Some hours later, the mood changed, shattered by a small boy's excitement. Lolly had long since learned to take her brother's emergencies with a grain of salt and a smile. For a crisis with Joseph was apt to lie about halfway between disaster and laughter. Whatever the problem, it seemed to involve a short Eskimo and a long rope. To what purpose? Who could say? So this was Joseph's discovery, a caribou fawn. Bogged down in the mud, weak and near exhaustion, the tiny animal was about at the end of its rope. But now, as luck would have it, he was at the end of Joseph's rope, and help was at hand. All of a sudden, Joseph found he had about all he could handle. Well, if he could just get this little maverick steered in the general direction of the camp, that would help. Beyond that, he'd just have to hang on. Hang on he did, all the way home. The running tug-of-war was about over. Honors even. Now, Joseph's first order of business was a general cleanup. Not his own so much as the fawn's. He decided he must get the mud off. His fawn, it seemed, needed a bath. And right now. The little animal had suddenly become his fawn, his personal prize. And he felt sure Lolly would enjoy it too, once she could see how pretty a fawn could be. A really clean one. As for the fawn himself, it was a good question whether he needed or wanted more icy water on his back. But the matter wasn't for him to decide. And so, an improvised bath of sorts was had. Lolly, meanwhile, had been having other thoughts. In the harsh cold of the Arctic, a caribou meant meat and survival. This animal, so fortuitously delivered into their hands, just might mean the difference between living and dying. Their only wise move was to kill it. This seemed a cruel thing even to consider, yet the Eskimo way is to face the hard facts of existence. And Lolly, all her life, had been trained in the Eskimo way. But next thing she knew, Joseph was preparing to feed the little newcomer. He got out a can of condensed milk, the last but one, and asked her to punch holes in it with her knife. Lolly debated what to do. Feeding the fawn would almost compound the cruelty of later killing it. Besides, they needed the milk for themselves. Yet Joseph's joy in his newfound companion was so great, she hadn't the heart to disappoint him. Lolly missed her father more than ever and wished he would return. He would know what to do when she seemed not to. As the hunter of the family, he could have dispatched the fawn without a qualm, and neither she nor Joseph would have questioned the necessity. But now that she must face the decision on her own, it all seemed different and somehow wrong. She decided she would postpone the final act. First, she would get some rest. Perhaps after a good sleep, the problem would seem simpler, and her mind would be clearer and less confused. Suddenly, as though materialized out of nowhere, a caribou doe came on the scene. She went unerringly to her fawn, a mother's instinct, her guide. Sounds carry far on the open tundra, especially to those whose sharp ears can interpret their meaning. The ways of survival are indeed strange. Now Lolly realized she wouldn't have to kill the fawn. The wolf had solved her dilemma for her. Here was the food that could save them. If only the men would come home. Never a day passed but what Lolly didn't know that fervent wish. It was her daily prayer, her silent longing, forever close to her secret heart. The Eskimo eye is a trained eye, quick to notice the unusual. And one day, Lolly caught sight of something that roused her curiosity. As she came closer, she saw what the strange debris was, the wreckage of a boat. More than that, it was an Eskimo boat, the remains of an umiak, closely resembling her father's. She knew a sudden sense of fear and premonition.
Papa's gas can.
What could have happened? There was no way of knowing. The men obviously had met with mishap, and from the evidence, Lolly could only conclude they were lost. Tragedy such as this stalked the path of nearly every family in Lolly's village, so she was not entirely unprepared for it. Life for her and her people was never without hazard, and nothing was ever guaranteed to be safe and secure. But for all that, it was different when the pain was personal. She returned to camp with a heavy heart, and now Even little Joseph sensed their peril. What were they to do? Two small, brave fawns, themselves deserted and left on the tundra, every bit as orphaned as the caribou calf they had befriended. To stay here in camp meant to starve, with the short summer slipping away and winter sure to come. Lolly decided quickly they must strike camp immediately and start the long trek back to their village. The caribou meat was a must. In fact, their whole journey might well depend on it. She told Joseph to remember the spare ammunition. That was too precious to leave behind. Lolly decided to leave the tent and all the camp gear. Of necessity, they must travel light. Now the caribou fawn was a liability. He must be turned out to survive or starve on his own. Perhaps if they ignored him, he would go away. Lolly knew she must be firm. There was no longer any place for kindness or pity. And so the brave fawns set out to face their destiny. Lolly had only a vague notion of the distance, but home must be 150 miles away, maybe more. If an early storm were to trap them in the open, they would die of exposure. But it was a chance they had to take. Lolly set a course leading inland across the endless tundra. Joseph was puzzled at first, but she explained that this was the shortcut, the direct path the Raven would fly. To follow the coastline as they had come would be the long way around, and their food could not possibly last all those extra days of travel. Survival now depended on plain stamina, a shrewd reading of the land and its weather, and in the last analysis, on sheer luck. Lolly was aware that the fawn was following, but there was nothing she could do about that. Or was there? Caribou. A lucky meeting at the ancient fording place. The great herd was on the move, and the move was south. For this was the annual migration back to the sheltering forests below the Arctic Circle. Here, Lolly realized, was the solution to the problem of the fawn. There, with his own kind, was where he belonged. One of the does accepted him, for it is the custom of caribou to take in orphans with their own. Now, under the watchful eye of the vigilant bulls, the little fellow would have proper escort and protection against any wolves that might be in the neighborhood. The hours passed. The tundra was a challenge to any traveler, even the migrating birds in the sky who must navigate by instinct. It was as empty of landmarks as the sea itself. Lolly steered her course more by feel than knowledge. She knew that home lay somewhere beyond that distant horizon, and to reach it, they must keep pushing on.
Are you sure we're going the right way? As sure as I need to be. How far is it to home? Don't worry, we'll get there. When? Tomorrow, the next day. That's what you said yesterday. Well, don't think about it so much. Just keep walking.
Suddenly, the travelers found themselves faced with danger of a most alarming kind. A savage wolverine. This terror of the tundra feared nothing, neither man nor beast, and certainly not two defenseless Eskimo children. Then it occurred to Lolly what had attracted the animal. It was the scent of their fresh caribou meat. The strategy worked? Lolly could only hope so. She had hated to lose their precious ration of caribou meat, but anything to throw the wolverine off their trail. And for the moment anyway, he seemed to have disappeared. Perhaps they could safely catch their breath and rest. The excitement and the exertion had made the youngsters ravenous. Perhaps a quick snack while they could. Now this tiny portion meant life itself.
Lolly.
Lolly knew that for as long as they carried fresh meat, the animal would trail them. It might even attack. A last and final sacrifice seemed their only chance.
Mommy, the river.
Was swift, but the footing held, and soon the children found themselves on the opposite bank, free at last from wandering wolverines. Now that their meat was gone, the children would have to live off the land. No easy task in this bleak and hostile setting. It might be a long time between meals. Then Lolly spied a nest, a wild duck's nest. But it turned out to be a disappointment. Lolly knew why. Too late for eggs. These had long since hatched into ducklings. Good eating in themselves, she decided, if they could be found. There they were, ducks for dinner. The problem now was how to catch them. Two youngsters on foot, ducks on the pond. It posed a neat dilemma. Lolly's only solution was to try to surround them, take them by surprise, then move in and grab one in the confusion. It seemed as good a plan as any. In fact, there was no other choice. Joseph to go one way, she to go the other. A good try, but no luck. Ducks weren't all that easy to catch, it seemed. Then Joseph had a second chance. One of the ducklings had got hung up in the willows. A capture, after all. But catching was one thing. Killing was something else. Joseph couldn't bring himself to face it. This was something Lolly hadn't counted on. She could see that her small brother, in some ways, was too soft-hearted to be a proper Eskimo. But could she herself kill a thing so helpless?
Let it go.
The seriousness of their situation, these Eskimo children were not beyond a few lighter moments. For to smile is to survive in this otherwise harsh land. When the little birds called phalaropes danced on the water, it was enough to bring chuckles and make the head swim. Some days later, and many miles farther on, the children came upon a half-grown goose. No more than a gosling, really. Lolly figured he must have been a late hatcher, for he was still in his flightless stage and unable to take wing. This was a piece of luck. Earthbound as he was no different than they were. And their chances of catching him on the ground were promising. About 2 to 1. And so there began a wild goose chase such as the tundra had never seen. But suddenly, the Arctic fox saw his opportunity. The Arctic dictates its own harsh rules. Some win and some must lose in the age-old game of survival. As the days went by, Lolly and Joseph became aware of the ancient laws and more began to feel their sharp edge, since they too were competitors in the fight for life. They had become predators like the rest. But of course, to outsmart your prey, you have to see it. And sometimes nature takes care that you don't, by means of camouflage. In the case of some of her creatures, she has carried the art to near perfection. Not perfect enough, perhaps, for Lolly, out of the corner of her eye, had caught sight of the hidden bird. And now she had a plan. She would see if a little strategy could fool it. Let it pretend to be a bush. She would pretend to be blind. Joseph, of course, was the key to it all. One false move out of him and the bird would explode into the sky and freedom. Quick as the fox and as effective. In a matter of minutes, the meal was done to a turn. It was tasty fare, the best and most nourishing in a long while. Like ravenous animals, the children fed. No time for talk, and no telling when they might eat again. As the time passed, the trek began to take its toll. Lolly herself was tired to exhaustion, and little Joseph seemed to need rest more and more often. She let him sleep as much as she dared, but she knew they must press on. It was their only hope.
Wake up, Joseph. We must go on.
So forget it. I bet I could kill him as good as Papa. Stop talking so much. Do you know what I'd do if I had? Quiet. I'll sneak up on him and I would... Stand still and be quiet. Now he sees us. I see him too. Pow, pow, pow! Shh. You're making him nervous. When animals get nervous, they get dangerous. He can't scare me. But he scares me. Now do what I say and be still.
As time went on, Lolly decided that one or the other of them should stay awake during rest periods. While she took a quick cat nap, Joseph would do sentry duty. More often than not, Lolly awoke to find her lookout asleep at his post. Exhaustion was beginning to wear them both down. the Arctic scheme of things, some are hunters and some are browsers, and some are lowly scavengers. Now, out of necessity, the children had become scavengers. But this was no time to be squeamish. The meat was fresh killed and would nourish hungry humans as well as wolves. Besides, Lolly remembered the Eskimo saying, "No man knows hunger unless he is fed with a wolf." As the days passed, it began to get colder and colder, and before long the children were getting their drinking water out of ice-covered ponds. This was the unmistakable sign that winter was near. Obviously, there was to be no staying of winter's icy hand. Sure enough, blackness came down out of the north. The winds began to moan. Yet the brave Eskimo youngsters kept on going, putting one foot in front of another, step by step, day after day. As long as they could stay on their feet, they must somehow keep traveling. It was their only hope. Cry of the north. She knew what this meant. The geese were leaving. They were on their way back to warmer regions far to the south. And their departure only confirmed what she already knew, that the Arctic winter was not far behind. As the blizzard mounted in fury, Lolly decided they must find temporary shelter. Lucky for them, an abandoned den, possibly that of wolves. But let the wolves return if they must. Possession was at least 9 points of the law.
Lolly? Lolly? What? Did you ever see anybody die? Mama and Ernest? Ernest? Our brother you never knew. There isn't much to it. A person just goes to sleep. The missionary thinks that you go to heaven when you die, but Papa says the old people are right. They say your spirit goes into the next little baby that's born. We will get home. I'll
To keep her little brother's spirits up, Lolly sang a lullaby, one she had learned at the mission school. It was by someone named Brahms, translated into Eskimo. Now Lolly had made up her mind what to do. She knew how foolish it was to try to continue cross-country in the time of the Arctic whiteout. That combination of conditions when sky and land are the same color, when there is no horizon to be seen or distinguished, when men have been known to get confused and finally lost, and then to perish. She decided to backtrack. They must return to the river and follow it downstream to the coast. That way, at least, they could maintain a direction and not go in circles. And so the river became their lifeline, their only hope for getting home. This was something they could follow with confidence, whiteout or not. As the leader, Lolly had decided they must not stop again until they reached the coast. But a small boy's curiosity was still enough to bring Joseph to an occasional halt.
Come on!
Within minutes after the two youngsters had passed this way, their scent was picked up by another traveler of this Arctic wasteland. And the trail they had left behind was an easy one to follow. The human scent here was fresh and unmistakable. The Great Bear knew there was something in the vicinity that intrigued him very much. As small boys will, Joseph was constantly finding reasons to dally, little knowing that danger was pressing from the rear. Fatigue, thirst, hunger, these were testing him almost beyond his endurance. Lolly could feel him slowing down, but she knew they must keep going. It was some hours later when the weary travelers finally came to a halt. Little Joseph, for his part, could go no farther. He said nothing, in the stoic Eskimo way, but his sister could sense that he was near exhaustion, even as was she herself. Well, maybe they were through traveling at last. They had reached the sea. Lolly had one last plan. Here on this headland, they would build a beacon fire. Possibly some passing walrus hunters might notice it and come to pick them up. It was a slim hope, perhaps even a forlorn one. But it seemed to Lolly the only card she had left to play. Fortunately, the ocean currents had covered this beach with the flotsam and jetsam of the sea, including great stores of bone-bleached driftwood. Two last matches. The gamble for survival was getting more and more desperate. One final chance. The spark of life itself. Wait, said Joseph. For all his immature years, he knew a hunter's trick or two. One especially he remembered seeing his father use. And warmth, cook fire and beacon light, and most important, a gambling chance, all from one last match. Now the vital question was, would anyone see their signal? And would they themselves see the rescuers? Lolly realized they must keep a constant lookout, forever checking the changing sea. A boat might so easily appear to be an ice floe and pass on by unnoticed. It was their only hope that someone would see their fire, that someone would come to get them. It so happened that someone did. The polar bear is the most deadly animal of the North, a wanton killer who will stalk a human child as though it were just another seal. Then Lolly had an inspiration born of desperation. Fleeing in panic, the bear almost collided with three silent figures who had also seen the fire. was an exciting moment for all, and quite joyous for Eskimos, usually so solemn and restrained. Emotion for these people is only an occasional luxury. It was Ningyuk who finally told the hunter's story, of angry walrus wrecking boat, of being marooned on an ice pan, of the wind changing and driving them miles from land for days and days, of finally being driven back to shore. It was an oft-told tale among hunters, almost commonplace, a recounting of risks accepted, dangers survived. But to little Joseph, it was the stuff of legends and dreams, and he drank in every word. For the starving hunters, food, good, rich caribou meat. For little Joseph, a moment of pride and fulfillment. My children, Ningyuk spoke, they are the true hunters. They have brought us meat. They have faced the great bear. You, Joseph, you must have this gun. Father to son, sign and seal that little Joseph was an Eskimo hunter at last. For Lolly, a good luck amulet to protect her from all future harm and all further evil. And so ends the legend of the brave fawns, a tale to be remembered and retold again and again when the nights are long and the Eskimo warms himself at the glowing torch of tribal memory.